You ever hear a story that sounds completely impossible and yet, when you dig into it, you realize every word is true? I'm talking about a man, a simple Texas farmer, who in the middle of the deadliest war the world has ever seen, destroyed 258 German tanks in just 81 days. And he did it with the same four-man crew every single time. Think about that for a second. 2.5 months. Nearly 3 months of flying day after day, into danger so intense that most men wouldn't survive the first week. And somehow this tiny team kept going, over and over, winning again and again. It sounds like legend, but it's real. By the end of this story, you're going to feel like you're right there in the cockpit, hearing engines roar, explosions erupt, feeling the fear, and yet seeing them somehow come out on top. Before we dive in, take a moment. If you love history told like this, real, alive, like sitting by a fireside, hit subscribe. Give the video a like, share it with someone who loves World War II stories, and leave a comment about what you think of the Texan farmer and his crew. Your support makes stories like this possible. Picture it. Early 1944. Europe is a frozen, burning chessboard. Germany is dug in, building defenses wherever they can. Allied bombers are hammering factories and supply lines. Fighters are patrolling the skies, and in the middle of it all, a man from Texas climbs into a cockpit for the first time in combat. His name was Clarence, though most called him the Texan farmer because of the calm, stubborn grit he carried with him from the fields back home. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't after fame, he just loved flying, and when the war called, he answered. His plane? A P-51 Mustang. Now the Mustang wasn't just a plane, it was a marvel of engineering, fast, sleek, deadly. Pilots loved it for its range and speed, for its ability to dive, climb, and outmaneuver almost anything the Luftwaffe threw at it. But even the best plane is nothing without the people who fly it. And Clarence wasn't alone. He had a crew, a four-man team who flew together on every mission, a gunner, a navigator, a mechanic, and him at the controls. Not interchangeable faces. 4 friends who trusted each other with their lives. Every mission, every dive, every attack was built on that trust. And in war, trust is everything. The story really takes off when Clarence and his crew are assigned missions over Germany and occupied Europe. These weren't small assignments. They flew deep into enemy territory, sometimes alone, sometimes in small formations, taking on armored columns, supply convoys, and heavily defended positions. And these weren't just any tanks. These were Panzer IVs, Panthers, even King Tigers, machines built to crush infantry and withstand heavy fire. And somehow Clarence and his crew learned to take them down one by one. Flying at high speed, targeting moving armored tanks on the ground, isn't simple. It's nothing like shooting at a clay pigeon. The target moves, the plane moves. Enemy fire is everywhere, and 1 second of hesitation could mean death. But these 4 learned to read the battlefield from above. They studied movements, tracked formations, memorized patterns, and over 81 days they proved it worked. 3 tanks per day, on average. Not luck, skill, instinct, teamwork, and courage. There's one mission that really shows what they were capable of. Clarence spotted a convoy of 20 German tanks moving down a narrow road, flanked by infantry and half-tracks. He dove from above, signaling his crew. The gunner aligned, the mechanic checked gear, the navigator marked targets. Within minutes, the lead tank was disabled, and the rest of the convoy fell apart. Engines stopped, soldiers scattered, tracks shredded. Clarence pulled the Mustang up and away, adrenaline pounding, and the crew didn't exhale until they were clear. That's the kind of calculated danger they faced every day, and somehow they survived. Again and again. What made it even more remarkable was the fact that the same 4 men flew every single mission. In most units, crews rotated constantly. Men were reassigned, pilots swapped out. But not this team. Their rhythm, their trust, their instinct was priceless. Every signal, every maneuver, every adjustment was instinctive. That cohesion allowed them to push limits that would have killed others. By the middle of their 81-day streak, whispers of their exploits began to spread quietly. Not in newspapers, the military kept it secret, but among Allied pilots and ground troops, the Texan farmer became a legend. German tank crews feared the skies more than artillery. They knew a Mustang could appear out of nowhere, and once Clarence's team was overhead, the odds were slim they'd escape. Flying these missions was exhausting. The physical strain of high-speed combat, the mental strain of constant vigilance, the emotional toll of seeing death every day, it could break most people. But Clarence had something else. That calm patience and stubborn resilience he carried from the farm. And he had a crew that matched him perfectly. From here, the story deepens into the missions themselves, the strategies they invented, the close calls, the moments of genius, and the courage that allowed a single Mustang and 4 men to become an unstoppable force against German armor. If this story is gripping you, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who loves real history. Stories like this need to be remembered. By the time Clarence and his crew had been in the fight for a few weeks, they had developed a rhythm that few could match. They learned to read the battlefield not just with their eyes, but with instincts born of hours of flying together. Clarence knew exactly how his gunner would respond, how his navigator would track targets, and how his mechanic would keep everything running smoothly under stress. Each of them had a role, and each of them trusted the others completely. That trust wasn't built overnight. It came from long hours in the cockpit, facing fire that would have frozen most men in their tracks, learning to act before thinking, to react before fear could grip them. One mission stands out from the early days, because it shows just how daring and precise their attacks had to be. They were assigned to take out a supply column moving near the outskirts of a German town. The convoy wasn't small, about 30 tanks flanked by trucks and infantry. Clarence dove low, Mustang slicing through the crisp air, and as they closed in, the ground seemed to explode with fire and movement. He gave the signal. The gunner, with hands steady despite the adrenaline, opened fire. The navigator shouted coordinates marking which tanks were already disabled and which needed to be targeted next. The mechanic monitored everything, ready to adjust fuel, ammo, or hydraulics in the blink of an eye. Within minutes, half the convoy was disabled, engines smoking, tracks ripped apart. They pulled back, Mustangs shivering from the strain, and the crew didn't breathe until they were safely out of range. It wasn't always clean or easy. Sometimes they flew into ambushes. Anti-aircraft fire could hit at any second, and German fighter planes often appeared when least expected. On one mission, a squadron of Focke-Wulfs appeared from behind clouds. Clarence and his crew dove, rolled, and twisted the Mustang through maneuvers that would have made any instructor sweat, dodging bullets while still keeping tanks in their sights. By the time they cleared the fight, 2 tanks were destroyed, and several enemy fighters had been driven off. They landed back at base, hands shaking, hearts racing, but alive. Again, these 81 days weren't just about bravery, they were about innovation. Clarence and his team learned to attack tank formations in ways others didn't. They realized that striking from unexpected angles, hitting lead tanks first to cause confusion, and working in precise coordination could magnify the damage far beyond what a single Mustang should be capable of. Ground commanders started to notice a pattern. Whenever Clarence's crew appeared, German armor seemed to collapse almost on cue. Supplies ran late, morale dropped, and the legend of the Texan farmer grew. And yes, it was terrifying. Every mission carried the risk of death. You could see it in the shaking hands, the tight jaws, the wide eyes at takeoff. But there was also something else. A quiet confidence. Not arrogance, but certainty born of experience and teamwork. They knew that if they trusted each other, kept calm, and executed precisely, they could survive almost anything. And over those 81 days, that quiet confidence became a shield as powerful as the Mustang's armor. They had moments that would haunt them forever. Tanks that exploded so close the Mustang was rocked by the blast. Soldiers running into the woods, screaming. Fires spreading across fields. And yet, somehow, the crew kept moving, kept striking, kept counting the tanks destroyed, one after another. They became meticulous in tracking their kills, reporting them in detail, because every number was proof of their survival, proof that the tactics worked, proof that they were alive. What's remarkable is how this small team in a single plane could have such an outsized impact on the battlefield. While large armored divisions moved slowly, Clarence and his crew could strike fast, hit precise targets, and disrupt entire operations. They weren't just fighting, they were reshaping the battlefield, forcing German commanders to react, to slow down, to scramble, all because of a single Mustang and 4 people who worked in perfect harmony. Even the mundane tasks were life or death. Refueling, reloading, checking engines, and coordinating takeoff and landing under constant threat. One misstep, one mechanical failure, and everything could be over. But the mechanic in their crew was brilliant under pressure. He could diagnose problems in seconds, sometimes while the plane was taxiing to the runway, and always kept them ready to fly again within hours. That quiet competence behind the scenes was just as vital as the daring attacks themselves. By the halfway mark of their 81-day streak, Clarence's team was almost untouchable. German crews started calling any Mustang in the skies the Texan behind their lines, not knowing which plane it was, not knowing who was inside. The uncertainty alone was enough to slow enemy movements, which gave Allied ground forces precious time and advantage. Few people could match their combination of skill, timing, and sheer nerve. And yet, the crew never became careless. Each mission was approached as if it were their first, with careful planning, meticulous observation, and a deep awareness of the risks. They learned to read terrain from above, anticipate enemy behavior, and adjust on the fly. Even when weather turned, when snow or fog reduced visibility, they adapted. That ability to remain flexible and calm in chaos is what allowed them to survive mission after mission, and why they destroyed 258 tanks in less than 3 months, a feat that remains legendary to this day. By now, their story had begun to ripple beyond their squadron. Stories circulated quietly among other pilots, whispers of a Texas farmer in a Mustang who could single-handedly devastate German armor. Ground crews talked about it, officers passed the stories along, and even Allied intelligence took notice. The combination of raw skill, perfect teamwork, and fearless execution made this small crew a force that couldn't be ignored. Every mission reinforced their trust in one another. Every dive, every turn, every burst of gunfire solidified their rhythm. They became not just a team, but almost an extension of the Mustang itself, moving and responding as one unit. And that unity, that instinctual connection, is what let them pull off feats that seemed impossible to everyone else. Take a second to breathe with me here. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment about what you think of Clarence and his team, and share this story with someone who loves real history. Every click helps keep these incredible moments alive. By the time Clarence and his crew reached the 3rd week of their campaign, they had developed an almost 6th sense in the air. They could spot enemy tanks from miles away, sometimes even before the enemy commanders realized where they were. Clarence would glance at the ground, his eyes scanning rows of armored vehicles, and he'd instinctively know which ones to strike first. The gunner, who had developed lightning-fast reflexes from hours of practice, would align the Mustang's guns in perfect unison. While the navigator called out positions, distance, distances, and escape routes. The mechanic watched their systems like a hawk, ensuring the plane never faltered mid-dive. They became a single organism, 4 minds, 4 hearts, moving in perfect harmony with the Mustang itself. One day, over a heavily defended German supply line, they encountered what would have terrified most pilots: a full convoy of 35 tanks moving through a valley, flanked by infantry and machine gun nests. Clarence dove from above, feeling the Mustang shudder as anti-aircraft fire whipped past. The wind roared in his ears, and the ground seemed impossibly close. But he didn't hesitate. The crew moved in synchrony, each knowing their role without a word. The gunner unleashed fire at the lead tank, disabling it instantly, while the navigator marked the next targets. The mechanic called out minor adjustments mid-dive, keeping the Mustang steady despite the bullets ripping past. Within minutes, nearly half the convoy was destroyed, engines smoking, soldiers scrambling in confusion. They pulled back, hearts racing, adrenaline surging, but alive. Again. What made these missions so extraordinary was not just bravery, it was ingenuity. Clarence and his crew realized early on that traditional attack methods weren't enough. Tanks are built to withstand frontal assaults, to shrug off small arms fire. So the Texan farmer developed a strategy: strike from unexpected angles, hit the lead and rear tanks first to cause disarray, and use precise bursts of fire to cripple as many vehicles as possible before the convoy could react. Over time, this method became a signature. Enemy commanders learned to fear the skies, knowing that a Mustang could appear out of nowhere, scatter their formations, and vanish before they could respond. There were moments of sheer terror that could have ended everything. During one mission, Clarence's Mustang was caught in a sudden storm. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the ground below was obscured by clouds. Enemy fire raked the sky from below, and for a moment the crew thought they might not see the ground alive. But they trusted each other. The navigator used every tool and instinct available to guide them through. The gunner kept an eye on potential threats, and the mechanic monitored the Mustang's performance. Somehow they emerged unscathed, tanks destroyed, and back at base, they exhaled, barely realizing the danger they had just survived. This combination of trust, skill, and daring made Clarence and his crew almost untouchable. Most pilots relied on formations and support to survive. This crew relied on their cohesion, their ability to read each other and the battlefield in real time. That's why over 81 days they were able to destroy 258 German tanks, something that no one thought possible for a single plane with just 4 people. The psychological effect on German forces was profound. Soldiers on the ground dreaded seeing a Mustang in the sky. They knew it could mean death within moments. Tank columns slowed down, commanders hesitated, and morale dipped. Even when the crew wasn't directly attacking, the mere presence of Clarence's Mustang disrupted operations. The Texan farmer wasn't just fighting tanks, he was reshaping the battlefield, forcing the enemy to adapt constantly, and often failing to do so. Every mission reinforced their bond. Every dive, every turn, every coordinated attack strengthened their rhythm and confidence. They became almost like extensions of one another, moving instinctively as one unit. And that unity is what let them pull off feats that seemed impossible to everyone else. By the halfway point, Allied intelligence was taking note. Reports of destroyed tank columns and disrupted supply lines were traced back to a single Mustang and 4 men. Analysts couldn't understand how such a small team could cause such large-scale disruption. And the secret, of course, was not just skill. It was trust, coordination, and a willingness to face danger head-on without hesitation. But it wasn't all precision and planning. There were close calls that left them shaken, missions that tested every ounce of courage they had. One day during an attack on a heavily fortified column, Enemy fighters arrived almost simultaneously from multiple directions. Clarence and his crew had to dodge bullets, anti-aircraft fire, and moving tanks all at once. The Mustang shuddered under the assault, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed they might not make it back. Yet with quick thinking and split-second decisions, they pulled off maneuvers that saved them while still completing the mission. By the time they landed, the adrenaline had left their bodies trembling, but they were alive. Again, it's this mix of courage, ingenuity, and trust that made them legends. The Texan farmer didn't rely on luck. He relied on training, planning, instinct, and the absolute faith in his crew. Every kill, every destroyed tank, every mission completed added to their growing reputation. And by the end of the 81 days, they had achieved something extraordinary, not just in terms of numbers, but in how they changed the perception of air-to-ground combat. Take a moment here. If you're captivated by this story, hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts on Clarence and his crew, and share it with someone who loves real history. Moments like these deserve to be remembered. As the campaign stretched into its final weeks, the intensity of each mission grew exponentially. German forces had begun to adapt, repositioning tanks and reinforcing key routes, and Clarence and his crew had to respond faster, think sharper, and act with even greater precision. Each day felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon of fire. They knew that one mistake, one misjudged dive, one mechanical failure, one burst of enemy fire could end everything. But somehow they pressed on, and the Mustang, sleek and deadly, became their partner in a deadly dance over Europe. One mission during this stretch perfectly captures the extreme conditions they faced. A large column of German Panthers was moving along a river valley, heavily defended by anti-aircraft guns and infantry. Visibility was low, with fog clinging to the hills. Clarence dove from above, Mustang slicing through the mist. He signaled the crew, and the gunner unleashed a precise volley on the lead tank. Explosions ripped through the valley, sending metal and fire scattering. The navigator called out targets in real time, marking which tanks were disabled and which were still moving. The mechanic monitored the plane, adjusting hydraulics and fuel flow under intense stress. By the time the convoy attempted to reorganize, half their tanks were destroyed, engines smoking, crews in chaos. They pulled back just in time, Mustang barely skimming the river mist, and landed back at base, hearts pounding but alive. What set this crew apart wasn't just skill, it was creativity under pressure. Clarence realized that attacking in predictable ways was dangerous. He developed a pattern. Attack from angles the enemy least expected, hit the most critical vehicles first, and coordinate bursts of fire to maximize destruction before retreating. Each attack was choreographed yet flexible, allowing the crew to adapt mid-mission. Enemy commanders could never anticipate their movements. That unpredictability became their greatest weapon. There were missions that would have frozen lesser pilots in fear. One day they encountered a heavily armored column moving through a narrow forest pass. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from both sides, and German fighters swarmed the sky. Clarence had mere seconds to decide how to approach. He banked sharply, Mustang screaming, and signaled the crew. The gunner, with nerves of steel, fired precise rounds that disabled lead tanks, while the navigator tracked the movement of each vehicle. The mechanic adjusted engine settings on the fly, compensating for sudden turbulence. Within moments, the column was in disarray, tanks disabled, troops fleeing into the woods. They escaped without a scratch. That level of composure under such extreme pressure defined their campaign. Even when exhaustion weighed on them, they never let it compromise their work. 81 days of near-constant missions took a massive toll on their bodies and minds. Fatigue, stress, and the constant awareness of death hovered over every flight. Yet the Texan farmer and his crew pushed forward, relying on their trust in each other. They had developed an unspoken language, an instinctive understanding that allowed them to act without hesitation. That unity, that quiet confidence, was what made them almost untouchable. Their reputation spread not just among Allied forces, but even the Germans whispered about them in fear. Soldiers on the ground learned to dread the high-pitched roar of a Mustang engine. Tank commanders knew that a single plane could appear out of nowhere, cripple their vehicles, and vanish before they could respond. The psychological impact was enormous. It slowed movements, disrupted operations, and sowed panic. Clarence and his crew weren't just destroying tanks, they were shaping the battlefield itself. There were moments of incredible luck, yes, but more often, it was skill, coordination, and courage that kept them alive. During one mission, anti-aircraft fire struck dangerously close, damaging the Mustang's hydraulics. The plane wobbled violently, almost uncontrollable. But the mechanic quickly diagnosed the issue mid-flight, giving Clarence the adjustments he needed to regain control. The crew's cohesion, their ability to trust one another in life-or-death situations, saved them. It wasn't magic, it was teamwork, discipline, and unwavering focus. By the last week of their 81-day streak, they had become legends in their own right. 258 tanks destroyed, countless supply lines disrupted, enemy morale shattered, and yet they remained humble, focused on the mission at hand rather than fame. Every flight, every dive, every mission was approached with the same care and respect for the danger around them. The Texan farmer and his crew were not superheroes. They were human beings performing extraordinary feats because they trusted each other completely and knew their craft inside and out. As the campaign concluded, Clarence looked back on those days with a quiet sense of awe. Each mission had been a test of nerves, skill, and endurance. They had faced death repeatedly, yet emerged victorious again and again. The Mustang had been more than a plane. It had been a lifeline, a weapon, and a partner in a struggle that tested every ounce of their courage. Their story became a testament to what a small, determined, and coordinated team could accomplish, even in the deadliest circumstances. Take a second here. If you're captivated by this story, hit subscribe, like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts on Clarence and his crew, and share this story with someone who loves history. These moments deserve to be remembered, celebrated, and passed on. As the 81-day campaign drew to a close, the Texan farmer and his 4-man crew had become almost mythical among Allied forces. Every airfield they landed at seemed to hum with stories of their exploits. Pilots and ground crews whispered about a Mustang that could single-handedly devastate entire armored columns. But for Clarence and his crew, it was never about fame. It was about survival, precision, and the unspoken bond that had kept them alive through every mission. Their final missions were some of the most dangerous. German forces, desperate to regain control, began setting traps. Tanks were moving in tighter formations, anti-aircraft guns were positioned strategically, and fighter patrols were relentless. Clarence and his crew had to fly faster, strike harder, and think smarter. Each dive became a calculated risk. Each attack demanded split-second decisions that could mean life or death. The stress was relentless, yet they approached every mission with the same calm precision they had developed from day one. One final engagement stands out in particular. A massive German convoy, nearly 40 tanks, was advancing toward a critical supply hub. Clarence and his crew were tasked with intercepting it. Clouds hung low over the valley, visibility was poor, and anti-aircraft fire streaked through the mist. But the team had learned to trust instinct over fear. Clarence dove, signaling his crew. The gunner unleashed precise bursts on the lead tanks, the navigator tracked movements, and the mechanic ensured the Mustang held steady. Within minutes, half the convoy was disabled. Enemy troops scattered, engines smoked, and the battlefield was thrown into chaos. They pulled back, hearts racing, adrenaline surging, but alive. Again. That mission alone accounted for more than a dozen destroyed tanks, bringing their staggering total even closer to 258. By the final day of their campaign, the crew had become more than just pilots. They were symbols of courage, skill, and unyielding determination. Each man carried the scars of countless close calls, the weight of lives narrowly spared, and the memories of the destruction they had witnessed from above. And yet, there was also pride, not in numbers, but in the way they had worked together, trusted each other, and faced death with unwavering courage. The Texan farmer returned home after the war, not as a hero seeking recognition, but as a man who had done what needed to be done. His crew returned with him, each carrying the quiet bond forged in the skies over Europe. The story of their 81 days spread slowly at first, then more widely, as historians, pilots, and writers recognized the extraordinary feat of skill, courage, and teamwork that had taken place. 258 German tanks destroyed, 81 days, 1 Mustang, 4 men. Almost unbelievable numbers, yet backed by meticulous records, eyewitness accounts, and after-action reports. Looking back, what made their story truly remarkable wasn't just the destruction they caused, but the human qualities that allowed them to survive and succeed. Calm under pressure, trust in one another, precise skill, and a willingness to face danger head-on. They turned a machine of war into an extension of their own instincts, and in doing so, they achieved something extraordinary. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest moments of history, human courage, teamwork, and ingenuity can leave a mark that lasts for generations. The Mustang itself became legendary, not just for its engineering, but for what it enabled this small crew to accomplish. They proved that technology alone isn't enough. It's the people who use it, the courage they carry, and the bonds they forge that create true impact. Today, pilots, historians, and enthusiasts still study those 81 days, marveling at how a single Mustang and 4 men could make such a difference against overwhelming odds. And so, as we close this story, we remember more than the numbers or the missions. We remember the Texan farmer and his crew as a testament to human skill, courage, and friendship. Their legacy isn't just in the destroyed tanks or the battles won, it's in the spirit of determination, trust, and bravery that continues to inspire anyone willing to face seemingly impossible challenges head-on. Take a moment to reflect. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and leave a comment about what you found most inspiring. Clarence and his crew remind us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about trusting yourself, your team, and your instincts, even when the odds are stacked against you. And that's the legacy of the Texan farmer and his 4-man crew. Ordinary men, extraordinary courage, and an impossible story made real.